Marry me, Isabella Moretti. Nothing else. Just those 4 words. The graduation cap and bouquet in Isabella's hand crashed to the ground. What? She whispered. Oh my God. Say yes. Her friend, Arya, squealed in delight, and she parted her lips to speak, but no words came out. How could they? It was her graduation day. She'd finally graduated college and was about to take pictures with her friends when an entourage of 5 sleek black cars sped up to them. Men in black suits and tinted eyeglasses stepped out as they lined up by the side in a rehearsed order. Amongst the cars, one particular one stood out in the middle. It was a red sports car. The rough driving had left their hearts in their mouths, but it couldn't compare to the shell shock she felt the moment the door to the unique car was pulled open. Her jaw dropped open. Isn't that Luca DeLuca? Her first love and ex-boyfriend? The boyfriend she'd abandoned 4 years ago after making a public disgrace of him at a friend's party. The man she hadn't seen in years, standing in all his 6'3" glory? Isabella was confused. She'd never thought they'd cross paths again, and that too on her graduation day. How did he know the college she attended? They hadn't been in contact, so how did he know to be here today? Seeing his face brought back bittersweet memories. She had once loved him dearly and would still be with him if it hadn't been for her parents' adamant refusal, mostly her father. As the only child and heir to his business empire, he was against her marrying a nincompoop nobody, as he placed it. Luca wasn't as privileged as she was. Isabella was the only child of one of the top business conglomerates in the country, but he grew up as an orphan and, as a result, lived a struggling life to fend for himself on the streets. They didn't move in the same circle and had met out of pure luck. He had nothing to his name, but the man in front of her looked nothing like she remembered. Everything he had on, down to his car, screamed luxury. He looked powerful and like he was in charge. Seeing him evoked a frisson feeling within her. All the men bowed their heads in greeting as he stood in all his glory, looking like a Greek god. And then he was moving towards her in firm, calculated steps until he dropped one knee at her feet. I've waited for this day. Marry me, Bella. What? Come on. Say yes, Isabella. Everyone chimed in with low choruses of agreement, and she glanced around to see their happy faces, then returned her gaze to the man on his knees. She was worried. Marriage? When they hadn't been in contact for years. Moreover, had he forgotten that her parents did not approve of him? Luca knew exactly what was going through her mind, and he handed her his phone. She weakly reached out for it. Hello. Isabella. Her father's cool voice flowed through the phone. I give my blessings. Marry him. And then the call was disconnected. It only made her more confused. What was going on? But with her father giving his approval, she knew she had no choice. It had always been that way. She had lived a sheltered and controlled life under her parents. At least she gets to be with her first love, Isabella thought, and with a nod of her head, she answered. Yes, Luca. I will marry you. Applause erupted all around, and the people swooned and awed over them as he placed the ring on her finger. Let's go. He ordered as he took Isabella's arm in his, and his men echoed. Yes, boss. The next thing she knew, he was guiding her towards his car and they were off. Isabella felt giddy, and her face flushed red at the unexpected turn of events. When did you get back? Where have you been? How did you know to come here? How did you get my parents' approval? She pelted questions at him, but all she got in reply was silence. It was then she felt the slight shift in the atmosphere. She was the only happy one. He hadn't said a word to her since they left. She turned to ask what was wrong, and a gasp escaped her lips at his expression. He was mad with anger. His face was hard, and he had a cold, dreadful look in his eyes as he navigated the road. His knuckles whitened as he gripped the steering wheel tightly, and she saw his jaw tick as the sound of his teeth grinding together reached her ears. What was this tense atmosphere? Just as he approached a red light, his phone beeped and he accepted the call. Boss, should we let them go now since the confirmation has been given? Luca turned to her, the corner of his lips curled up in a sadistic smile as he replied in a cold voice. Let them go. After all, I have gotten what I wanted. The tires of the car screeched to a halt as they reached the marriage registry. Isabella nervously glanced around. What are we doing here? She asked, but he ignored her and the door was pulled open once again. She followed after him. What are we doing here, Luca? Luca faltered in his steps, regarding her with an irritated look. Are you dumb? Yider. What does one do at a marriage registry? She was taken aback at his tone. We have to talk to my parents first, she argued, and he scoffed. Do I look like I care? You wanted their approval and now you've gotten it. Isn't that why you left me years ago? Luca sneered at her, and Isabella's eyes widened in realization. This man wasn't the man she fell in love with. He had changed. His eyes, which once held love, now had only contempt. She glanced around. The registry was practically empty as it was late, with only his men around, and even if she were to scream, no one would come to her aid. They were obviously on his side. This is not right, Luca, she pleaded, and he stomped over to her. But you abandoning me after making a mockery of my love for you is? You humiliated me, Bella, he roared. You made a ridicule of me in front of your friends. The memory is engraved in my mind to this day. When things got hard, it was my fuel. I wanted to watch you and your so-called family grovel at my feet, and now it is time. He gave a sarcastic laugh. I would make sure you suffer. Come on. He forcefully pulled her along. Isabella tried to struggle free, but he wasn't having it. The next few minutes were a blur as they signed the marriage certificate, and he drove her over to her home to pack things. Tears streamed down her eyes all through the drive as she wondered if she would ever get out of the mess she was in. From the way he was treating her roughly, she knew that life with him would be hell, but there was nothing she could do anymore. They were already married. Get out, Luca ordered as they reached her home. They were met with her father's loud angry voice as they went in. I refuse to let my daughter marry such an imbecile that has nothing to offer. Get me the commissioner's number. I'd have him arrested. He held me captive so I had no choice. A good-for-nothing street nobody. Is that so? Luca's cold voice interrupted as he stepped in with a downcast and hopeless Isabella by his side. Yo, I'd have you arrested. Let my daughter go. Mr. Moretti yelled with his face swollen in anger. Yes, please. Isabella dear, come over. Mrs. Moretti encouraged, but Isabella threw a weary glance at Luca, who was watching them all with a bored, uninterested expression. Isabella, come here right now. Her father ordered once again, and Luca let out a dark chuckle. Fools. Excuse me? What insolence? The insolence is you trying to take my wife away from me, he sneered. You should be grateful that I let you go scot-free. With everything you did to me, that was mercy on my part. Mercy? You forced my daughter into marriage? It is null, you hear me? Null and void. You didn't have the decency to meet her parents first? You street animal. That was as far as Mr. Moretti could get, as Luca slammed him against the wall in a chokehold. Dear father. His family exclaimed in fear, but there was nothing they could do. Let me go. Get the guards. He choked out, evoking a malicious laugh from Luca. Your men are currently being held up by mine, and any wrong move, they'd be shot dead. You don't think I'd come here unprepared? I told you I've planned this day for years. He snarled into the face of Mr. Moretti, which was already turning blue. Mr. Moretti clawed at his hand as his airway became restricted. Isabella and her mother could only watch in horror as he spluttered. You've crossed the wrong person. Have you dealt with? You must have forgotten. There's nothing you can do. Luca thundered. Do you think I'm the same person I used to be? No. I have worked my way to the top, and you do well to remember that. He let go of his father-in-law and he fell in a heap on the ground, then stared down at him with a venomous look in his eyes. With one word from me, my enemies are destroyed. Wherever I go, heads roll. I do not think twice before repaying my debts. You must have heard of the new mafia king who doesn't show mercy? He cocked his head and the eyes of everyone in the room widened. They had indeed heard about the new dangerous man on the throne. Luca tipped his head condescendingly as his voice dropped several degrees. I am Luca DeLuca, the new mafia king of New Orleans. You, Mr. Moretti stumbled over his words when he'd finally caught his breath. You're the one they've been talking about? It can't be. It just can't. He trailed off with wide eyes. News had been going around about the new man that had just risen to power. Word had it that he came from nothing and had to work his way up to where he was today. How could he not have guessed? If the stories he had been hearing were true, then it meant his daughter was in trouble. This was no longer about a father's disapproval. Luca DeLuca was a dangerous man. Luca sniggered at the look of realization on their faces, especially that on Mr. Moretti's. The grudge he had against the man went deeper than anyone knew. He crossed his arms across his chest in defiance. Are you surprised? After all, you thought you'd bury me completely with that scandal? Mr. Moretti avoided his eyes, and Isabella looked between her father and newly wedded husband. What scandal was he talking about? I was just a young boy struggling to earn a living, and you decided to use it against me. Because I was ready to be your underdog for money? He spat, his words dripping with bitterness. What is he talking about, father? Isabella's small voice spoke up. Luca, I was the one who betrayed you. I broke your heart. I ridiculed you. Please leave my father out of this. Leave my family out of this. Aren't you satisfied with ruining my life alone? She pleaded, but all she got in reply was a loud laugh of disbelief from him. Then his face suddenly turned hard and serious, and he threw an accusing stare at Mr. Moretti. You didn't tell her? Mr. Moretti remained quiet, confirming his suspicions. Luca laughed again, but this time it didn't reach his eyes. You really didn't tell her? My God, what a hypocrite. You didn't tell your daughter that her boyfriend was the underdog you used for your illegal dealings, and when things were about to get out of hand, you made him a scapegoat. What? Isabella paled, and he threw her a disgruntled look. How do you think we met? What would a poor nobody like me be doing around your circles? I was your father's underdog, but he asked me not to say a word to you. I thought he'd come clean after we broke up, but he didn't. Isabella's face held an appalled expression. Father? Is that why you made me break up with him? Because you didn't want him associated with your name when the scandal was released? You ruined his life. She asked. Talk to me, father. She felt stupid. How could she not have known? He just disappeared into thin air after they broke up, and she didn't hear about him since then. Be quiet. Luca peered at her with a proud look. You're just the same as your father. One word from him and you abandoned the street thug. You could have stayed by my side. I loved you. You were the only one I had, but you left me high and dry. He laughed bitterly. Not to worry. I'm back to repay it all. He threw a menacing look at Mr. Moretti, who had gone silent in shock. Your scheme almost destroyed my life. Do you know what I had to go through in that slimy prison cell? The things I had to do to survive. His gaze held a faraway look as he recollected those awful moments. Moments that built him into what he is today. They made him tough and resilient. Luca's lips curled up at the side, and he raised an eyebrow at him. Don't worry. I'm not going to kill you. Yeah. I just want to give you a peek at the hell I went through. Your family almost ruined my life, so I'm here to ruin it. You and your daughter, your wife is just a bonus. He took a step towards him, and the man watched with a dreadful look. I'll make you suffer. I'll break you all and then put you back together. Then I'll break you again. You'll beg for death, but that would be too easy of a punishment. I also begged for death, but it didn't come. I'll make you wish you were never born. He threw a look at Mrs. Moretti and Isabella. Then your family would wish they never knew you. You, Isabella, would pay for how you treated me because I will bring hell to you, and when you begin to get used to it. He paused, and his face was rid of all emotions. I'll kill you. Then he spun around and took a seat on the sofa, cross-legged. A big smile graced his face. Go get your things, wife. You don't want to keep your husband waiting, do you?